everyone, and welcome back to another World of Tanks console video. Part 2 of the HMH bundle coverage is here, and this time it focuses on the brand new Tier 8 French heavy tank, the HMH AMX M4 MLE 49. Now, if you're wondering what this tank is like, quite a devastating heavy tank. And those sandbags do count as armor, or spaced armor if you'd like to call it. So this tank is its brand new brawler, and unfortunately I don't really have that much of a gameplay in this one, but I can run down some statistics and comparing it to another tank that's in its tech tree. And I will refer you to a friend of mine named Spartan Elite 43, sorry about that, Spartan, that had a recent replay from Steel Titan, I believe is his name, giving you some lowdown on this tank as well as an Ace Tanker gameplay. And believe me, I had no such luck getting any kind of Ace Tanker, only a first class mastery. But seeing as he managed to cover that fairly well in his replay file of it, I might as well pass it on along to him. So if you guys do enjoy it, please click on the link in the description to get on that replay. And I look forward to seeing you guys again. But before we continue on, let's get over to the tank comparison sheet first and then head off to Spartan's video. Alright everyone, so continuing on with the tank comparison sheet, you see I have the HMH M4 being stacked up against the FCM50T, and I had previously done a comparison with this tank with the nameless, the Tier 8 Japanese premium tank, and if you want to see how that one stacks up, I'll leave a link down in the description, or you can check out the playlist section of the channel where I have all the tank reviews for console tanks in there. So the HMH AMX M4, or I'm just going to be calling it the M4 out of this video for lack of speed thereof, rather than saying the entire name, and the FCM50T. Both are Tier 8 French heavy tanks. The firepower stat, the M4, again I'll try to keep that to M4, the M4 stacks up at 39 to 36, beating out the 50T, and that is because it uses a 100mm caliber gun versus the 90mm on the FCM50T. And the reload, of course, will suffer because it's using a larger caliber gun with a 10.30 second reload versus the 7.5 second on the FCM50T. And you're going to notice that this has been changed from effective reload, and I decided to pull those out because I forget that I don't include these necessarily because of some tanks do carry autoloaders. But again, if you ever feel like you want to find out what the how to apply the bonuses to your tank, feel free to look on the right and use that as a kind of side note for you to find out what the effective reload on your specific tank is. So it does not have an autoloader, so the interclip reload will not matter. The base rate of fire on these tanks is 5.83 on the M4 and 8 for the FCM50T. And of course that again comes down to the 90mm being able to load faster. However, if you're one of those heavy hitting tanks and you like penetration on your French, well then that's where the M4 will definitely take your lead on the FCM50T with 232 on the standard AP rounds. And then if you decide to amp it up with the APCR on this tank, you will dab it up to 263. Or if you feel so lucky as to hit a lightly over target, 50mm of penetration on the HE rounds. And of course that will bump up your damage from 300 to 400. The 90mm will do 212mm of penetration on its standard AP, 259 on APCR, and 45mm of penetration on its HE. And this is probably where the difference, as again, the 100 on this versus the 90, 300 versus the 240. This HMH AMX M4 is not going to lose out in putting out some damage for you, and kind of ends up being a little bit closer in DPM only because of the alpha damage. Shell cost for this 100 mil, of course, will be a little bit higher, 1,030 on the AP rounds, 4,000 if you decide to fire APCR, 650 for the HE, versus the 255 that the FCM50T AP round costs, 4,800 on its APCR, and 255 on its HE round. So if you're looking to make a little bit more profit off your tanks, then the FCM50T is probably the way to go, since its shell cost is a lot cheaper. But then again, if you're able to dish out the damage, then the M4 probably won't lose out, and the difference might end up becoming more even. Although they use two different type of caliber guns, both maintain the same amount of velocity on their shell types. 1,000 on its AP, 1,250 on the APCR, and 1,000 on the HE. So just to keep that in perspective, the 100 versus the 90 on these will not matter. They still run the same shell velocity, and APCR, of course, is used more for snapshotting. However, the ammo capacity on the M4 stops at 60, while the FCM50T is at 91, so that heavy tank's still managing to hold out a lot more ammo and give you a little bit more flexibility in the loadout that you so desire. The DPM or base DPM of these tanks, 1749 for the AMX M4 versus the 1920 or 1920 for the FCM50T. So again, DPM, higher reload. This, of course, will be the same if you penetrate every shot, and with 212 you might find that a little bit more difficult than the 232. So this 1,749 might be a little bit more definite in the M4 to be able to pull off. Aim time 2.9, losing out to the 2.3 on the FCM50T. But again, that's not too bad. This is a heavy tank, of course, but the dispersion at 100 meters is 0.36 for both tanks. The gun elevation on the M4 beats out the FCM50T with 20 degrees of gun elevation, and depression as well, with 10 degrees of gun depression on the FCM's 8 degrees. Hull traverse speed, of course, because this is a little bit more heavily armored, 25 kilometers and and 28 on the turret, losing out to the 40 on the FCM50T and turret traverse of 36. So the FCM will, of course, because it's a little bit more lighter in armor and weight, will be able to turn a lot faster and get those flanking light tanks covering more, while the AMX prefers you to be in front, where it can brawl you out head to head. Mobility stat on this tank is 18. Apologies for that. And on the FCM50T is 30. They both have the same engine power, which is 1,000. The power to weight ratio on this is 14.29, losing out to the 18.46 on the FCM50T. 5% chance on both tanks is still 20%. So it's up to you relatively whether or not you want to load the premium consumable or swap out the fire extinguisher for a different consumable. Might be more so to equip a second repair I forget those repair kit versus the fire extinguisher, only because you do not want to be tracked and then double tracked again. The top forward speed of the FCM is 51, beating out the 40 kilometers on the M4, and the reverse speed is 20, beating out the 15. So again, you can definitely notice that the FCM50T is a lot more mobile, but we'll get down to the weaknesses of that a little bit more. Ground resistance, 1.1, 1.2, and 2.4 on the FCM50T beats out all of them on the M4, 1.6, 1.8, and 2.5. survivability stat, and this is where things start to look a little bit better for the M4. 55 versus the 49 on the 50T. Both tanks have 1500 hit points, but you can see the overall armor thickness will definitely shine on the M4 with a total of 8 to 250 millimeters versus the 20 to only 120 being the highest. The front of the hull is 190, beating out the 120 on the FCM 50T. The side is 55 and the rear is 40, but those lose out to the 80 millimeters on the side of the 50T and on the rear. But the turret being 250 millimeters thick versus the turret on the FCM 50T, which is only 120, you can see why this tank is again a brawling heavy versus the 50T, which is a little bit more flexible. Now the sides of it are on the turret are still 120, and the rear of the turret is 60, being even with the rear of the FCM 50T and beating out the sides by 40 millimeters with only 80 on the 50T. So again, this is where the M4 definitely stacks out ahead versus the 50T, because the tank is a lot more heavily armored, and I will show you that when I get to the armor value that is currently on console. But finishing up here, the concealment stat of this tank is 16 and 12 for the 50T, so you have a little bit more on the M4, and 0.09 when stationary loses out to the 0.08 on the FCM 50T, and 0.06 on when moving loses out to the 0.04. Oh, never mind. They both win, and I believe that is because the HMH tank comes with its own unique camo or permanent camo on it, so it kind of has a little bit of a boost in the camo or concealment stat due to that, while the FCM 50T does not carry that, although the Liberté probably will stack up a little bit more evenly or even beat it out with its concealment stat. The spotting stat on the M4 is unfortunately a little bit low, 73, and that is because of its view range being only limited to 370, while the FCM 50T has a really good view range of 400, and that helps it out a lot more with not having to carry coated optics or recon and situational awareness, as well as Brothers in Arms in the beginning. The base view range is very healthy for it, and you might want to consider having those perks trained, as well as putting on coated optics on your HMH M4. But again, it's up to you. But again, coming down to the final part of this, the premium bonuses that you are all probably interested in, and that is 60% silver bonus for the AMX M4 49 and 15% crew experience. So this tank is actually a better crew or a better silver maker than the FCM 50T, which is only 45%. So this might be the difference in what makes you decide on purchasing this tank. Overall, this tank is a brawling heavy versus the 50T, but again, the 50T is a little bit more flexible in the situations that it is able to take advantage of. But before we go, and then before you leave and go off to Spartan's video, let me just bring up the armor model viewer before you head off, just to show you a little bit more in detail as to what this tank has. So you can clearly see that the sandbags on the tank are modeled. Keep that in mind when you're angling, that they do count as an extra few millimeters of spaced armor, and my dog seems to be wandering around. But you can see that the front of this tank is very good, and as long as you use the gun depression, you can hide the lower plate of the tank, which is apparently its weakness from the front. However, do keep in mind that when you are staring this tank down, that this front part right above here, even though it is angled, can be penetrated fairly easy. It is only around 70 millimeters thick, and as well as the cupola. So if you are thinking of side scraping, probably do it towards this way rather, which would be to the right, or depending on where you're driving from, to the left, rather than pulling around and side scraping from the right, because you will give them clean shots into the cupola. Something to give you or keep in mind for you guys when side scraping. But again, this is all up to you whether or not you purchase this tank. Remember, it is Black Friday, so if you guys decide to pick this tank up with the bundle, it is available, I believe, for... I did not check this actually. Both tanks are available for 21,800 gold. Again, if you want to see some epic gameplay, I was not able to get any. I'll leave a description or a link down below in the description, for Spartan Elite's video that covers the Ace Tanker gameplay from Steel Titan. But that's it from me, guys. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.